We're going to describe some scenarios that shows what I like to call a symbiotic relationship where QRadar and IBM's identity management software benefits from one another's integration. And for this, let's keep in mind two resources. One is a bidirectional RESTful API that QRadar has. Very capable, you can access all the data in the asset database. You can query about offenses. Very rich API. And also, the capability actually in both products carries the license of IBM Directory Integrator, by which, by using assembly lines, you can accomplish the scenarios that are in here. In fact, we have actually created demos showing some of these scenarios before. Let's talk about the first thing. By virtue of the flows, Q flows in particular, QRadar is actually very good at detecting user ID information flowing. I know that this particular user log in into this particular app, and by looking at the Q flows, we extract that user information. But we do not know who that user ID belongs to. However, identity management is all about knowing all the user IDs per each user, because when you provision a user, that's precisely what identity management does. One of the many things it does is create user IDs on all those systems for that particular user, so it has that information. So what we can actually do is actually give QRadar a hand by creating what is called a reference map. It's a data structure in QRadar that basically reads something like, we have Mr. X, and these are all the user IDs that Mr. X actually has been provisioned to. In fact, we show a video of this a while back. So when in QRadar you want to ask the question of show me all the things that Mr. X did in a particular period of time, or on some system, whatever you want to do it, because QRadar has advanced SQL searches that can actually take advantage of that reference map. Is very easy, and again, we show in the video this live, that we actually can produce a report in which we say, well, Mr. X, and actually in the example, in the demo, we actually put the manager's information, which is also something that identity management is aware of, and we show Mr. X under this particular user ID did this, under that particular user ID did that, and so on. It's very, very, very useful way of helping QRadar for that. Now, let's talk about help on the other way. What happened with recertification, particularly with the addition of Cross Ideas product to IBM Identity Management? We get great capabilities on doing attestation or recertification. But so in theory, a manager every 6 months, every year, goes and reviews the entitlement of every one of their users and removes all the accesses that those people do not need to have. In practice, what happened? Well, the manager looks for the select all button and try to complete the recertification. So you are compliant. You can show the auditors that you do that. But in reality, in practice, the manager is not going to delete accesses because he doesn't know whether his employee use them or not. And if he deletes something a user is particularly using, well, that generates more work and dissatisfaction on the user. So again, that's the theory, and here's the practice. Now, in QRadar, it's actually very easy. We have gone through this before in previous videos, to create a reference set called, for example, frequent users, or you can call it actual users or whatever, in which you put a rule in QRadar that says when anyone has a successful authentication into this group of application or this particular application, take the user ID and put it into this list. So QRadar, as people are using every one of those, every user is logging in using the resource, we actually populate this reference set. Then you let that run for, let's say, 4 months, and after 4 months, to accommodate for people's vacation, you actually, or 6 months, whatever your recertification period, it really depends. You actually disable the rule, and you have a list of the frequent users, which actually is very useful in QRadar to detect people that have logged in or have attempted to log in a sensitive application, and they're not a frequent user. This is the first time this guy going in. Let me make sure that it's not an APT which reset a password or whatever. So, but going back to identity management is actually very useful, because via IDI you can extract that information from that reference set in QRadar and actually produce the specific report that when the guy is performing the attestation, the recertification, he can see that, you know, which are of his employees that have used the application. And if he doesn't see those users in there, well, now he can feel confident he can actually eliminate their access. Let's talk about another reference set that can be useful. Let's help QRadar now a bit. Fresh passwords. Fresh password is obviously a password that has been changed recently, let's say within 1 week. And why do I want to monitor password freshness? Well, because it is classic, and actually we have customers that have fell into that and have created rules like the one I'm going to describe right now, in which they create this list of called fresh passwords. So whenever identity management, in identity management, a password is reset via DPRA or the very mechanism that identity management has. Via logs, you know, QRadar can catch and say, well, I see that this particular user is resetting his password. So it puts him into this list. People reset the password, they go into the list, and you know that the reference sets in QRadar has an optional parameter called time to live. And you set that to, for example, 1 week. And that I will consider a password that is fresh, it has been changed in a week. So now you can put a rule in QRadar that will detect, for example, a malicious internal user or an APT or external user resetting the password by, for example, going into the challenge response questions in QRadar, in the identity management system, and resetting the password if they are not set correctly. And so when the hacker does that, then the new user, when he tries to log back in, he cannot log in because the hacker just reset his password. So he will have to reset it again. So if you create this list and put a rule that basically says, you know, whenever I see a password change, oh, here come via the logs, good. But I will check into this list, and if I see that a password is being changed, and that user ID was also already in the list, that means that the password was changed in less than a week. Either the guy is losing his memory, or, you know, an APT or somebody else was reset the password. So you may want to investigate that and file an offense to check for that. Another, QRadar detecting abuses and asking the help of identity management. So we actually created a live demo and a video on this, in which QRadar receives from Guardian, in that particular case, notification of a user abusing the access right that they have. So then QRadar produces a particular message that an IDI listening task is waiting for, and then when the message gets produced, the user ID information is taken out of the particular syslog, and then IDI asks identity management to actually revoke the particular role that that person had because he abused of that. It's a nice case that we show even in a live demo. Let's talk about segregation of duties, something that, again, Cross Ideas brought a great enhancement into our identity management. But you may argue that the SOD in violations in identity management are kind of static or potential. I really do not know whether a particular user actually executed the both roles and actually perform the action. So, I mean, the idea is to actually catch when a particular user, let's say that, well, first via IDI and the RESTful API, you create two reference sets. There are many ways of doing this, but one can be you create a reference set, or two reference sets actually, or two or more in QRadar. Like, for example, one has the role 1 and role 2, and then whoever has a potential to execute an SOD gets into this list. And then all you need to do is create a rule that basically when we see via the logs that a particular role is actually being used and the guy is in any other list, then we fire an offense and we notified the identity management that a particular SOD, segregation of duty, has actually been incurred, and we can call those, if we want, dynamic SODs. Again, and these are just some examples just to give you some more ideas of the things that you can get when you put identity management and QRadar to work together via the integration that has been created between those.